Welcome to this exclusive special report streaming on WFSB Plus. I'm Kara Sundlun. The murder of a high school student at a house party that got out of control in Shelton, Connecticut has captivated the nation as so many of you watch the murder trial of Raul Valle for the killing of 17-year-old Jimmy McGrath, a star lacrosse player at Fairfield Prep. In a stunning turn of events, Valle walked away a free man after a partial not guilty verdict for murder and manslaughter and a mistrial on the lesser charges. Today, the jury foreman, Jim Stulman, is here, so we can take a deep dive on what actually happened here. And I just want to thank you for coming in, because I know that it really helps, I think, for people to be able to really understand in a deeper way, beyond the soundbite, what was really going on with this verdict. So we appreciate you being here.
Okay, sure, thanks.
So let's just go back for those of you who don't actually remember. This happened about 4 years ago. We had 16-year-old Raul Valle, 17-year-old Jimmy McGrath. There's a fight at a house party. Alcohol's involved. Kids are getting out of control, and Raul Valle somehow ends up stabbing Jimmy McGrath and killing him. That part everybody agrees on, is that right?
Right, right.
So the tricky part was Raul Valle was charged with murder, with manslaughter. Those were serious charges. Originally, they offered him a plea deal of 60 years.
Or 40.
40, okay, 40 years. So I thought he would serve 40, but it was up to 60. Okay, so anyway, but they offered him a lot of prison time. The defense said no and went to trial. In this case, people have reported it was a huge win, because on the most serious charges, this jury found him not guilty. Help me understand, because there are those who say, but this 17-year-old kid is dead and he just walked away. Why did you arrive at the not guilty verdict on the most serious charge of murder?
Yeah, well, I think the first impression is, just as you said, one kid goes to a party, stabs another, kills him, so they just assume murder. But what we had to do is, according to the instructions, for each charge, there's a series of things that the state has to prove, the elements in the case. And when we looked at all the things that the state was required to prove, the murder charge didn't apply at all. Because one of the things was his intent had to be to specifically kill Jimmy McGrath for that to be a murder charge. And he didn't even know Jimmy McGrath. Yet he did stab someone, but we all thought, and I think even the prosecutors and the family might have thought, that a murder charge was not appropriate for this case. That it would, maybe manslaughter would be more the charge they should have charged him with in the beginning.
So basically, the jury felt the prosecutors overcharged with murder.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
So there wasn't a lot of talk or disagreement in the first charge of murder.
Yeah, well, there was initially. That was the first deadlock. The initial vote we took was 11 not guilty, 1 guilty. And so what we thought was that one person that was convinced it was not guilty was, just as I was saying, it just seemed like a murder. A young man is dead, someone else stabbed him, and they couldn't get that idea of murder out of their heads.
So the first deadlock was 11 of you saying not guilty to murder,
right,
one holdout saying guilty because a kid is dead.
Yeah, and then by either overnight or the first thing the next morning, that person changed their mind and agreed that it was not guilty on the murder charge. And then most of the deliberations came over the manslaughter and the assault charges.
Okay, so when we move to manslaughter, and that is a lesser charge, and as you even just said, that seems more appropriate, and a lot of people were stunned that he was not found guilty on manslaughter. Explain that.
Okay, well, the first one, there were two possibilities. The first was manslaughter intentional. And so that would have to be that even though you can form intent in a matter of seconds, if you look at the whole circumstances that went on, all the confusion and the violence, that he would have to form that intent from the time he was out at the car in the 10 seconds it took him to get on the grass. And initially, most of us would have voted for the manslaughter intentional. But even though after we talked about it, it was possible that he could have formed that intent. It might have even been likely. But then again, it's on the burden of proof is on the state to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. And so with everything that was going on that night, everything that happened, for him to actually do that intentionally, we just didn't think there was anything else that the state showed us that proved that what he did was actually intentional. And then we got down to the next charge that was manslaughter reckless.
Right, which a kid is dead.
Right, and
there's
so
some
reckless,
sort of recklessness.
actually, so when we read the elements that need to be proved for manslaughter reckless, to 11 of us, it seemed like those elements were almost written for this case, because one of the definitions of the reckless is that he showed extreme indifference. And so by extreme indifference, he would know that he had a weapon, and that if he went back into that situation, that there's a chance that he could seriously injure or kill someone. And that seemed to most of us to be the perfect example of exactly what he did. He showed extreme indifference in going back into that with that weapon.
But you deadlocked 11-1.
Yeah.
I know you can't tell me who was the one, but help me understand what their argument was so that perhaps Jimmy McGrath's parents can understand. How is it that someone thought this isn't his responsibility?
Yeah, I think, now I can't speak for the one person,
But I'm sure they said their arguments.
Right. I think it goes to there's maybe something bigger to the case than that one. Like, that one person might have agreed that those elements were proved. But what I think from what he was saying was the way the whole case was handled, and that they blame one 16-year-old kid for everything that happened that night, where no one else was charged, no one else was responsible. And I think even though the elements might have been proved, he just wasn't comfortable. If we did come to a 12-0 vote and we convicted him of something, that we would have been a part of a system that he thought failed everyone involved. And so that's what I think his case was, that he just wasn't going to vote for something where the state mishandled an awful lot of things in the case.
So from your perspective, it was much more about a broken system than whether or not Raul Valle actually committed that crime.
Again, I can't speak for that person, but I think just from hearing the conversations and deliberations, I believe that's where he was coming from.
Did you try to sway him?
Oh yeah, I mean, that's maybe a couple of hours worth of, and again, we made a point of he shouldn't change his vote because he just wants to go along. But if we could really convince him, of the facts, and then if he does change his mind, we were comfortable with that.
How long did you stay in that kind of deadlock while he had to think about it? Because the whole Chip Smith instruction for our viewers was it's a term used in the legal world of, hey, there's a majority and minority. The majority is going to argue and try and get the minority because we have to come to a unanimous decision. So obviously you went back and you did what the instructions are, try to get the minority to join the majority. And how long did that take? And
I would say a couple of hours, because we revisited not just the testimony, the ring camera video, the cell phone video, the element. We went over the jury instructions. We did everything we could to try to change someone's mind.
And it wasn't working.
No, because I think also one of the things, I know the closing arguments aren't evidence. Mm-hmm. But what they do is they try to emphasize the points that they're trying to make, both the prosecution and the defense, mm-hmm. and the key points to remember. Mm-hmm. And so if you remember, they each had kind of a key sentence or phrase they used. And on the prosecution side, it was that you don't bring a knife to a fist fight. Mm-hmm. And that makes sense until you think about it. So if you don't bring a knife to a fist fight, but when you look at the whole circumstances, do you bring 30 of your friends to a fist fight? Do you spray someone in the face with a can of WD-40 in a fist fight? Mm. Do you surround the person's car, pound on it, jump on it, throw rocks and beer cans at it in a fist fight? Mm-hmm. So the idea that... Meaning,
just so our viewers can understand, describe, because I don't want the details of the case to get lost. Yeah. Jimmy McGrath happened to be there. He was a 17-year-old Fairfield prep student, by all accounts, a promising lacrosse player, a great guy. Somehow he's caught in the foray of Raul Valle said he was going back to protect his friend, right? And that there's some sort of instance where guys are in the car and all these other people, dozens or many, many other people are surrounding this car. They're drinking, they're out of hand. These teenagers are kind of wild and crazy.
Yeah.
And so the defense was talking about that it would be self-defense for Raul Valle. Did that play into it, that you thought he was self-defending?
No, actually, that's the one thing I wanted to try to clear up is, for the jury, the self-defense argument never entered into it. Because according to the instructions, we're not even supposed to consider self-defense until we find him guilty of at least one charge. Mm-hmm. And so we never even got to the self-defense part in the case.
Step one, is he guilty? And you found him not guilty and then couldn't agree on the lesser charges. So explain to our audience, the lesser charges were reckless manslaughter. To this day, you still believe he was guilty of that?
Yeah, 11 of us did.
So how does it affect you as a human being when you think of, I know you're a dad and a grandfather, and you have Mr. and Mrs. McGrath saying, I thought I was in a different courtroom. Our son is dead, and this other person's just walking out. We don't think he intended to kill him either, but he still killed him. How does that weigh on you as a human, that Raul Valle was able to walk free, but Jimmy McGrath is dead?
Yeah, well, he's not exactly free yet. They're going to retry him on those charges. But I think, we really paid attention to the jury instructions. I had them in my lap. Anytime there was a question or controversy or something, we went back to those instructions and we tried to follow the law as it was written.
For sure.
And so that's what we did.
And the two where you all had agreement, but when it came to the deadlock, do you feel that you couldn't move, and what's your hope for the future, given that 11 of you thought he was guilty on the lesser charges?
Yeah, the part that hurts us, I think, is that if they are going to recharge him and retry it, is that the family has to go through this whole thing again. And that was, that's the hardest part, that we couldn't make a decision one way or the other. And
some analysis has said the judge should have accepted the partial verdict, but made you go back and finish on not accept the deadlock and not do a mistrial. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I think like I said, we did go back and we deliberated for at least another 2 hours on that one charge, and there was no way this person was going to change their mind
on the reckless manslaughter.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And then the other thing is too, also on the assault charges. Again,
which are the lesser charges of reckless assault?
On the 3 other individuals that he stabbed, during the earlier portion of the fight. That's another one that we couldn't understand those charges, because if we did get to the self-defense part of that, we didn't see any way the state could prove that it wasn't self-defense. When he was on the ground getting beaten and kicked, and that he had a knife, but if there was a rock on the ground or a garden tool, anything he could have used to defend himself in that case would have been justified.
What did you think of Raul Valle on the stand as a 16-year-old crying? It was emotional to watch.
Yeah, but one of the things that we try to ignore was like any expression of emotions by anyone who's on the stand, because a lot of it is kind of scripted and rehearsed, and so we know that. So we try to pay more attention to just exactly what is being said, and not their appearance.
Mm-hmm. And when you were picked for this jury, you said you weren't aware of how much this case was being watched around the nation, both locally here, but also on court TV, on the national news, and has anything changed for you looking back, becoming more aware now of the eyes on this case?
Yeah, well, I think the good thing is that a lot of us got picked because we didn't know that much about the case. And after sitting through the trial and being in the courtroom that time and not being allowed to watch the news or social media or anything else, I think there's a good reason for us only to hear what's being said in the courtroom. And so...
Did July 4th, the break in the momentum, play into it as far as you get a day off and you're not right where you left off?
No, I don't think so, because as soon as we got back into the room, as if we never left. Yeah.
And have you kept in touch at all with any of the other jurors?
No, that's the strange thing. When we walked out the door to our cars, we said a few things, and from that point on, I haven't seen or heard from any of them.
So what is, now that you've done your civic duty, and obviously the McGraths are heartbroken, they want justice in some form, new charges. It sounds to me like you agree the prosecution, in fact, that was perhaps part of why you were able to allow a deadlock, is you felt like the prosecution is going to go forward and do something.
Yeah.
So you still think, after everything you've known, and you know more than most, that Raul Valle should be held accountable in some form?
Yeah, they can't just not come to some kind of a resolution on at least that charge. You know,
The reckless manslaughter.
Yeah, the manslaughter charge.
And what's your thought now? A lot of the comments as you watch on YouTube are, how did this happen? How were parents allowing drinking? All this. I'm thinking, I have a 16-year-old son, and high school can be a difficult time for parents because kids are starting to exercise their independence. You end up at a party, there's drinking. What were you thinking as you saw? What do you think in the beginning, where there was a house party with alcohol and parents? Are they responsible?
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that I was saying too about the closing arguments. When the Raul Valle's attorney got up, instead of saying it was a knife at a fist fight, the phrase he said was, there was a whole lot of stupid going on that night. And that really summed up what happened. There was so much that was between the underage drinking and the fighting and the group chats and everything else. And again, that's the one thing that really kind of stuck with people, is that one 16-year-old kid is going to be held responsible for all those mistakes that happened by both the parents, the kids, everyone else that night. And so I think that's the bigger issue, that how did all this happen? It wasn't just one kid's fault. There was an awful lot of blame to go around, and no one else seemed to get blamed. I know there's a lot of civil cases that have gone forward.
There are wrongful death lawsuits.
But as far as the criminal charges, that no one else even got charged in this case was hard to get over too.
Did the prosecution do a good job?
I think that the two attorneys that were there did the best they could with the case they had. But even the testimony, they had over 25 witnesses, and there were so many contradictions and inconsistencies in all that testimony. So that's another thing we had to take into account when we were deliberating. So the testimony was either unbelievable or inconsistent, and so that was another issue that was hard for us.
Did the defense do a great job?
Well, it's the first trial, so I can't have anything to compare it to, but I think they did a good job.
I mean, he was acquitted, and then the mistrial on the others. So we don't know. We'll continue to watch what charges the prosecution may file. They can refile charges, but I know when we were speaking before the interview, you said that gave you a little solace, if that's the right word, that you thought they're going to get a chance to do this again, because as a human being, you would like to see accountability in this case.
Yeah, because it would be nice to see them resolve it in a way where they didn't have to go through another trial.
Like a plea agreement?
Like something like that, yeah, because it was there were some emotional parts for us to watch in the trial. And when the medical experts were testifying and they showed the pictures of the kids, everyone that got stabbed, and that, to see Jimmy McGrath and the others and the injuries, that was the first time we heard the reactions from the people watching.
The parents
McGrath
and
family, everyone else
sister,
there.
Yeah.
And for them to have to go through that again, like you said, I've never had to deal with something like that. But if there was any other way to resolve this that would not involve another trial, I wish they could do something like that.
I did hear, I was listening to another interview where Mr. McGrath had said the trial was his way. He was going to start healing after the trial, and he was so confident in a guilty verdict. And now they're just kind of stunned, traumatized. They don't know what to do now. They're starting a foundation, which we hope to be speaking to them too. And they're starting a foundation in honor of their son, who by all accounts, Jimmy McGrath, I want to acknowledge, there's still this 17-year-old whose life was cut so short. From all accounts in the trial, he seemed like a pretty amazing kid.
Yeah, and even in that whole situation, he wasn't directly involved in any of the attacks. He was just a bystander.
So he was just, from all the evidence you saw, he was kind of just in the wrong place.
He was just a kid that was there, yeah.
Yeah. And I think as a parent, as we're watching this, we can't bring Jimmy McGrath back, but as you said, you raised 2 girls, I've got 2 kids, and what kids are doing nowadays, just that idea of how important it is that we not, I guess, lose sight of what teens are doing, because this is essentially a house party that got way out of control in just a nice suburban community. Yeah,
that started over a fight over a 12-pack of Bud Light.
That was
the first fight at Lazy Brook, and then it all escalated from that because no one was under control.
Did those parents, from what you heard, turn a blind eye to what they should have known of how much drinking was going on in the first location?
I think so, because even from the testimony of some of the kids, this was not the first time they've had parties like this.
That was the party house.
This was in both houses, and just in general, that the drinking is just a way of life almost for 16 and 17-year-old kids. And so that's the scary part. Because, I mean, adults can act really stupid when they have a few drinks. And these kids, I was 16 myself. And, so we know that it's a terrible situation waiting to happen when you combine the alcohol and the kids and
back to the intent, and I totally understand. You said that was really the biggest thing. You just didn't see intent for murder or manslaughter. But a lot of people come back to, didn't he leave, go back and get a knife, and then came back? So you would hope, I guess I was thinking when I was watching this, if it was my kid, I'd be like, oh my goodness, you've left a party where all that was going on, never go back, you're done, you've already left. How did that play into it, that people have said, but he got the knife and went back, he could have just left?
Yeah, well, there was a lot of contradictions in the testimony about the knife.
Okay.
And so, one person, for example, one of the witnesses in the car said that he was going through the console and the glove compartment, frantically searching for the knife. But everyone else testified that he was sitting in the back seat behind the driver with his girlfriend on his lap. So that he couldn't be searching for the knife. And so what probably was the case was the driver of the car had either thrown the knife to him or given the knife to him. Mm-hmm. And it was a mistake to put the knife in your pocket and go back with the others. Mm-hmm. But again, it comes back to, was it intentional or was it reckless? And so he most likely, when he didn't use that knife until he was on the ground getting beaten and kicked. So he didn't go back to that party with a knife with the intention of hurting someone with it.
Okay.
But knowing that you're going back and that something really bad might be happen if you have that knife on your person was the way we looked at it.
Okay. And so basically, as you just said, in the closing arguments, what stuck with you was a whole lot of stupid going on.
A whole lot, yeah.
Yeah.
On both sides.
What would you want to say to the McGrath family?
I've never been in their position, so I can't imagine what they're going through, and I wish we could have resolved it. I wish from the time of the initial charges until the end, I wish some kind of resolution so we could all kind of put this behind us and the healing could start, maybe even getting to the point of forgiveness at some point. But that's not possible yet. And so I just, I'm sorry that we didn't get to some kind of a conclusion.
And what would you say to Raul Valle, who was 16 and now 20?
Yeah, well, this isn't over for him either. He's still got a lot to go through, and he probably is looking at prison time at some point. But, and I know to a kid who's 16 or 20, the possibility of a 40-year sentence, that's a life sentence to a kid at that age. But he will have, even though it's hard to picture right now, he probably will have a life going forward that Jimmy McGrath isn't going to have that opportunity. And so I hope that he learns and can make something good come of this, when he does get that chance.
Looking back, any regrets or any things that you'd want to change?
No, I mean, I don't regret at all being picked for the jury, and even when we got back into the room and you had to choose a foreman. And so everyone looked around for a few seconds, and I said, if anyone feels like they're being called to do this, or they want to, or they think they should be, I'm fine with that. But if nobody really wants to do this, I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
And so that's how I ended up being the foreperson.
Did it play into if Raul Valle had been a full-fledged adult, at age 20 rather than 16 when it happened, would that have changed? How much did it matter that he was a teenager?
It played into it, because the 16-year-old brain isn't just as developed as someone else. And so maybe if he had been in his 20s, the decision in those 10 seconds to come back from the car onto the grass might have been it might have been easier to conclude that it was intentional.
But saying 16, that your brain isn't fully formed, that plays into it.
Yeah, that's where we said that whole definition of reckless, of extreme indifference, that just seemed to fit exactly what happened that night.
Anything else that you want everybody out there to understand?
No, just that an awful lot of people looking back on it after the trial, when we got to look at all the social media posts and people jumping to conclusions, even before they had any of the information. And then a lot of the hurtful, hateful stuff that was posted on social media. That's a part of, I think, a larger problem. I don't know if we've always been like that, or we just have an outlet for that kind of thing now that we didn't have before. But I would
Have you gotten any kind of hateful things directly to you, or do you feel...
No, I mean, I've seen some of the kind of the smart-ass comments online about what the jurors were and all that. But
yeah.
Personally, I haven't heard anything.
So what I think would be helpful is so people understand where you come from. So you're born and raised in West Haven, Connecticut.
Yeah.
You're a dad of 2 girls.
Yeah.
Grandfather, too.
Grandfather of 4.
Of 4. And you have spent your life working to help the hungry. You work with a food pantry now.
Yeah, well, that was a couple of lives. That's one I have now. And then before the food pantry, I worked for Connecticut Food Bank. But then before that, my dad and I owned a bar for 27 years.
You owned a bar.
So
okay.
That was that was a whole different life.
Did that play into it? Certainly you would have experienced, as your own human knowledge, you've experienced drunk people doing stupid things.
Yeah, when the defense attorney said a whole lot of stupid, and that's the thing. Alcohol can make adults do a lot of stupid things. But when you have these underage kids, that's just it's like an accident waiting to happen, more than an accident, tragedy.
Yeah.
And so that was such a big part of it. If you took the alcohol out of that situation, none of this would have happened.
So for the parents who think, okay, I'm trying to keep my kids safe, I'll just let them drink at home, or I'll let them do this, kids be kids, what do you want them to understand?
No, that's not the way to do it. I never did that as a parent, owning a bar. And I knew my kids, especially one of them, was more inclined to do that kind of a thing. But you really want to just keep tabs on them. And when it really gets out of control with these house parties and that's crossing a line.
In this case, do you think there was an opportunity where it was getting out of control at the first stop and the parents could have intervened and ended it first?
If there were parents there.
Okay. Your understanding was that it was allowed, but maybe they weren't there. What was your understanding?
Yeah, well, there was one parent, one mother at the first party at Lazy Brook.
And they were charged with allowing underage drinking.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know what was going on in that situation. And then neither parent was there at Laurel Glen.
At the second location.
And at the second location.
Okay, yeah. So either parents allowing, looking the other way, or parents not being home. Yeah.
Yeah, so hopefully if something good comes of this. Maybe people will begin to understand that this is not a situation that you should allow at all.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for your time, and I think that none of us sat on the jury, so we can't understand how it felt to you or all the things that were going on. But it was something that I think the McGrath family was so stunned, and other people were so stunned, they really thought it was leaning towards some form of guilty, maybe not murder. So we'll have to see what happens. My understanding from talking to you, and thank you for your time, is you would like to see this go forward and have at least some of those lesser charges redone in some way.
Yeah, just so there be some kind of closure, and then people can move forward from that point. Because right now they're kind of in limbo, with this all still up in the air.
Yeah. Well, Jim Stolman, we appreciate your time. Thank you for helping us understand what was going on in the 3 weeks of that house party murder trial, and we will, of course, for all of you at home, keep covering exactly what's going to happen in the future as far as what the prosecutors are going to do with any refiling of new charges. But we thank you for joining us.
Okay, and thanks for the opportunity to maybe hopefully clear up a few misconceptions and
Yeah, we do sometimes get quick to judge when people just watch one little clip. So I think this is where this format on WFSB Plus is so valuable, is you can really get in the minds of what was going on, at least with you as the jury foreman, and what was happening really behind the scenes, and taking a deep dive with us. So thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
And that concludes our WFSB Plus special. You can continue to watch this on all of those spots: Android, Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV, and more on WFSB News.